Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here to talk to you about Raging Loop. This is a weird one. I sent in for review code for this for the Switch when it came out for the Switch, but they denied me for it. And I thought, okay, I'll just get it when it comes out on PC then. It's already been out on PC for a while, but they released an update to the PC version that added the English version. And then P-Cube sent out an email being like, oh, hey, this is out now. So I bought it, but then I thought to myself, maybe I'll try and get a review code again. So I did. I just sent in a thing and said, hey, can I have a review code for this? And they were like, yeah, sure. For some reason. This time. But not last time. But okay. So I got a refund, put in the review code, and while I've played it, it took me about... Oh god, how far was it now? I have to get out of play full screen on the video I got in the background there. I think it was about 16 hours. Just let me make sure for you. Okay, Steam says 15, but I will tell you now that that was at, like, as fast as I could humanly play the game. I was going through text as fast as I could read it, and even then, sometimes just that little bit more faster. So... I got to admit, if you want to play the game in any sort of, like, you know, relaxed capacity, double that time minimum, but you're more likely to triple it. There is also some stuff that they unlock after the game is over, which I didn't touch, because frankly, it basically requires you to go through the entire game again. The two things they unlock are 5 epilogues related to some of the characters, which I didn't look at, because I didn't feel the need to. The story was pretty well wrapped up as was. And the second thing is they also included something called Revelation Mode, which lets you go back through the story with viewpoints from other characters. Which is a pretty neat concept, but I'd already just been through the story once, and I don't think I need to go through it again. They do tell you basically everything you need to know throughout the game about everyone's intentions, but the ability to go back to, like, the previous games, look at them, and be like, and by games, I'll explain what I mean shortly. But in the previous games, you can see the motivations and the ideas of the characters, which is a nice touch. I appreciate that. With that said, though, yeah, I've played through the game once. It took me about 15 hours, and, well, let's talk about it. Now, they have said that I can only show you video from a certain part of the game. So I basically just recorded an hour of the prologue, and that's what you're seeing in the background there. But they didn't say that I can't talk about things after that particular cutoff point. Although it's kind of funny, they don't actually say to you, like... they didn't actually say in the email, like, you can't talk about it beyond this point. In the game... There's a little, like, weird meta character that comes in and says something along the lines of... What's the word I'm looking for? That comes in and says something along the lines of, hey, you can't record video past this very specific point. Do you want me to remind you when you have to stop recording the video? Which I thought was a funny touch. Just literally being like, okay, this weird sheep just comes in and is like, okay, you can't record anything anymore. It's bizarre, if I'm being perfectly honest. It's really bizarre. There are a few options in here, including things like individual character voices, the speed, the text to speed, let me try that again, the speed of the text, and how fast it moves on to the next when you're in the automatic mode, and there's not that many, like, iterations, but I managed to find a sweet spot pretty quickly until I started just going through text as fast as I possibly could, so... It'll be nice and comfortable. They have the bare minimum of what's needed. Notably, the game's on Unity, but it runs fine. I didn't see any problems with the frame rate. You can see the frame rate up at the top right corner. This was recorded on my desktop, but I did play the majority of the game on my GPD Win 2, which is like low-level laptop hardware, and it ran fine. It only dropped a couple of frames whenever they put a lot of effects on screen. And the PC port for this game is a little weird. There's a couple of things. You select your language when you first boot up the game, and it actually separates your save data between English and Japanese, which is really bizarre. Not entirely sure what that's about. Also, there's no Steam Cloud, despite the fact that it should be relatively easy, but They just decided to make it so that you can't sync your progress between computers, but I'll help you out with that. The location of the save data is in your app data folder, local low, Chemco, and then there'll be a folder with Japanese characters in the form of like the name of Raging Loop, but in Japanese. So you just copy that from one computer to another and your save data will carry over just fine. Although I will point out that they do actually give you one of those like master keys in the options menu that lets you unlock everything, which is nice. I don't mind that. But still, it's a little strange that they don't have things like Steam Cloud. Controller works fine, but they just don't show you the buttons for it. But everything that you need is on the face buttons. Like if you press Y on an Xbox controller, it'll just show you the menu and you can do everything with the D-pad and the A button. So that's okay. That works. You don't need a shortcut for absolutely everything, but it's fine. It works. It's good. So let's actually get on to talking about the game. Now, Raging Loop is a visual novel, if you couldn't tell. It was actually made by a team working under Chemco, which kind of reduced my hopes for it. But considering that I went on the visual novel subreddit, which is something I do quite a lot, and it was getting some good reviews. And on VNDB, the visual novel database, it actually had a fair few good reviews for the Japanese version. So I thought to myself, you know what? Sure, let's try it. And I did. And the general overall thoughts of it? I liked it. I actually liked it a fair amount. It's a really interesting sort of mystery with a neat little gimmick to it. There are some downsides to this, of course, but we'll get to them, won't we? That's the entire point of these rants. And I've got, like, what, 40 minutes to do it in, which is wonderful, because I recorded a lot of footage for this. But anyway, Raging Loop, you are a guy, just a random guy, and it's actually kind of amazing what his name turns out to be. It's a spoiler, so I'm not going to say it out loud, but man, they got me good. They got me real good. If you're a fan of, like, Japanese and the way they, like, arrange kanji to make names and how you can rearrange kanji and, like, hiragana and katakana, of course, to make different names, they do that constantly through this. It's actually kind of incredible just how often they manage to pull it off. It's clear that they did a good job in the localization to the point where I was able to understand all of the little weird name things they were doing. Anyway, I'm off topic already because this game's got a lot of interesting things going for it. But anyway, main plot. You're some guy. You broke up with your girlfriend. You're driving out of the city on a motorbike road trip to get yourself back together. You end up crashing in a weird town. You end up wandering into some weird supernatural phenomenon. You get told to stay inside, you don't, you walk out, you see a wolf person, you get stabbed, you die, and then you wake back up and you find yourself going through the same thing again. You're in a time loop, a Groundhog Day time loop, and they directly relate this to Groundhog Day in the game, in the main plot. They just don't use the actual name because that's the thing Japan does. They also reference Star Wars. It's so obvious. Like, they literally use the word lightsaber in the localization, and they also talk about that weird golden droid, but there you go. So yeah, you wake up, you're going through the same set of events again, and you're wondering what the hell happened. But yeah, it basically turns into a mystery. What is the mystery behind the feast? What is the mystery behind all the characters that are taking part in the feast? And what exactly is causing it all to happen? You find out by playing through what is basically a version of the party game Werewolf. Now, I've played a lot of Mafia, which is basically the same game with a different skin, so this sort of concept is actually really engaging to someone like me. I love the idea of being able to drop into someone who's very cleanly plotted out a game of Werewolf to actually be interesting, with proper twists and proper characters acting in certain ways. Like, I played a lot of Mafia, I should say. I haven't done it in a while, but when you're playing with a bunch of random people, it's not as dramatic, but they've taken the party game of Werewolf and they've turned it into something that's very dramatic. It is quite on rails. There isn't much you can do to affect the game that won't outright kill you. We'll get to that. There's a lot of bad endings, but they they make it nice and dramatic. And you go through 3 completely different games of werewolf, and they escalate the stakes every time in a way that's really enjoyable, and they thoroughly understand the rules. Meanwhile, they actually go to the effort of doing something along the lines of not making it play like a game of actual werewolf. The characters act like they do in the story, and it's not like a proper game of werewolf where if you just logic your way through, you win. No, there is actually, the characters actually act in illogical ways, and they bring this up in the plot. One of the things I really appreciate about the game's writing is that while it feels a bit long in the tooth at times, they take a really long time to explain the internal thought process of the main character, the machinations of the werewolf plot, his ideas in how to win at the werewolf plot, and why exactly certain things go down and how they're good or bad, and what you should take from them. They don't leave anything up to chance. They don't leave anything just like off to the side for you to figure out. Some people might find this to be a bit frustrating. Me, I appreciated it because we're very clearly not playing like... It's not meant to be a blank slate character. He's very clearly meant to have his own thoughts and feelings about everything. So... He explains everything to himself in his own head to help the player along, and I do appreciate that because it means that people who aren't very familiar with the game Werewolf, its strategies or anything like that, won't be left out in the dust. You'll get a full explanation of everything. Meanwhile, you'll still also get that little flavor twinge that you get by having it be just like a linear story with pre-plotted dramatic twists and turns in it. And, well, that's good because the first 3/4 of the game are going through 3 separate games of Werewolf, being in 3 different roles every time, and trying to figure out what to do in every role, every game you play. And it makes it interesting, because you're trying to figure out yourself, along with the main character, just who the bad guys are, just who everybody is, just who... and who's behind the entire thing of the feast in the first place. It's engaging for those first 3 routes. It's thoroughly engaging. The characters are not immensely deep. Like 1 or 2 of them are, because they're more relevant to the story than everybody else, but some of the characters are 2-dimensional, but they're that kind of 2-dimensional that makes sense. When they end up doing something, or, you know, something else, or just basically whenever they end up doing something as part of the game, it feels like what their character would do. They're not poorly written characters, they're just not that deep, which is fine, especially since you've got like 10 of them and trying to go through all of the... Actually, no, that's a lot, there's more like 15, but when you've got 15 of them, it's like... yeah, you're not going to be able to get in depth with all of them without really getting like way too far into the sort of playtimes that you really wouldn't hope for. Some of them do get a little bit of an opportunity more to express themselves like really late in the game, but it's still not much. It's still relatively shallow character development, but it at least makes sense, and I'll take that over having really long character development for literally everybody that slows down the plot. But yeah, everybody acts in a reasonable way. Once you've met them and you have a little bit of time with them, you know exactly what they're going to... well, not exactly what they're going to do, but you know exactly how they should act, and they act in those specific ways. It's good writing. It's well done. Nobody acts out of character. So you're going through these 3 games. You're dying over and over again, and you're unlocking keys, because... this game is actually very similar to Zero Escape. I believe Virtue's Last Reward is the best comparison, but it's actually a lot more linear than that. There are very few alternative routes you can take, because pretty much every other alternative route you can take ends up with you dead. That's more or less the long and the short of it. There's even a couple of routes that just outright kill you, but not in the usual way. It's literally like, oh, you just died for some reason that you don't possibly know about. And you find yourself that, you find yourself just dead. No one killed you, nothing happened, you're just dead. And the game literally says something along the lines of, oh, you have to wait until the end of the game to understand exactly why you died here. It makes sense at the end, but at the time it was actually kind of frustrating. It was like, oh, I have this shit figured out. Nope, you're dead. You have to wait until the end of the game to find out why. It's so weird. But yeah, here's the idea. So since you're looping, and it's not a spoiler that you're looping, this is something they basically talk about in the, this is something they talk about like in the store description. It's not a spoiler. So as you're looping, you have to gain information, and in order to gain information, sometimes you have to die, sometimes you have to go down the bad ends, and once you've gone down the bad ends, you will get these keys, which will unlock other routes. And while it's overly linear, there's very little in the way of like free choice in this game. Like one of the things you can do, one of the things you do. Sorry, let me try this again from a different angle. There's more than a couple of situations in this game where you're dropped into a situation with two choices, and you pick one choice, you get a key, you die. You pick the other choice, you get a key, you die. But then you can use those two keys to get a third choice, in which you take that and you die, which gives you another key, which you can use to take an entirely different path a little bit up the chain. So you go into this little off path to find some information, and then it throws you back on the main path. They do this a few times for the most part, and those are the majority of the keys that you get. And the last couple of keys that they the only time it really opens up is they give you one key towards the very end of the game, which unlocks like 3 separate conversations that you can have, which then all lead into a 4th conversation, which then leads into the 5th conversation, which with all the other keys from the other conversations, which then goes straight on to the ending. So it's very linear. You'll be straight as an arrow, more or less. They almost could have presented this as a straight shot, and it wouldn't have made that much difference, which is a little bit of a shame, because I was hoping with the keys they'd do something a little bit more intelligent. Well, not more intelligent, but a little more like extra routing, you know? Give me something a little bit more off the beaten path to do that doesn't just immediately toss me back onto the main route. I'm thinking something along the lines of Virtue's Last Reward, where you gain one piece of information that unlocks a route, which gains another piece of information that unlocks another route, and it just gives you like more routes to go down. In this game, you basically just straight back onto the main path before you can even think about it, which is interesting way to go about it, but it's fine. It works. It makes sense. The information that you get really does help you out along the lines of, you know, figuring out what's going on. And as you're going through the games of Werewolf, figuring out who these people are, getting the little nuggets of information from them that you can use to turn the games in your favor in some intelligent and enjoyable ways, it does work. It's just, yeah, very linear, and you'll feel like you're on rails for most of it. And some of the explanations will just be like, oh man, you figured that out real quick. He's a very smart main character, strangely enough. Which is funny when you make him do something incredibly stupid and he ends up dead. It's kind of funny though, because the best way to get a key is to die. So you end up feeling the need to go down every bad ending just to make sure that you don't miss out on any keys. And it's very rare for them to actually drop a key on you in a bad ending in comparison to how many there are. It's weird. It's bizarre. But it's still enjoyable. They do a really good job with putting them into the right places so that you feel like you're gaining information at a relatively quick pace. And a couple of the times when they make it so that, like, oh, you have to try one option, then you have to try another option, then you have to try a third option because all of them end up with you dead. It's always amusing. That's the thing that makes me not dislike it. It's because they did a good job in playing with your expectations with the keys more than a couple of times, so that you find yourself being amused by the fact that you had to go and get this information in order to stand a chance to even live in the first place. Because it's just a nice touch in how they actually in how they handle the keys in this game. And you're able to just go back and forth between, like, routes freely. But again, since the game is so linear, it doesn't really matter. And at the end, whenever you, like, get a new key and you die, they always give you, like, a hint corner, which is like, oh, you can talk to the sheep, and the sheep will tell you exactly where you need to go next. Which is a little weird because... I mean, it's not weird because it's the only place you can really go. Whenever you get a key, chances are that key is going to send you to somewhere very specific. It's not like any key can be used anywhere except for towards the end. So it's worth reading the hint corners anyway, just so it'll tell you where to go next, just so you can hop straight in. So it's a little bizarre just how linear it is, especially like that. But again, it's fine. It works. You don't end up feeling like an idiot because of it. It's just... it's fine, it's fun. I don't mind it. So before we get on to... well, look, I have to talk about the way this game ends. And I'll try and be as spoiler-free as possible, but I'm just going to hold off on that discussion for a little bit to talk about the game's presentation, because it's not only is it relevant to why I think the ending's a little weird, but I just want to talk about, like, the way the game looks. Because there are some relatively basic background art going on, but I actually really like the character art. It feels a bit weird and lowbrow at first. I don't know why. It's not like traditional, like, generic anime style. It's definitely got a little bit of artistic merit behind it. It just looks weird at first, but you get used to it really quickly, and considering how run down the village, like, they call it a Hicksville, which I literally just read on screen, so it's basically just a backwater village, and after a little while of playing the game and seeing, like, these sprites, it actually feels kind of appropriate. The way that their sprites are drawn just feels appropriate to the sort of Hicksville lives they've got going on. I'm not saying it looks bad, I'm just saying it looks appropriate. It's strange, it's kind of hard to explain. I've never been one for artistic merit, but I still think that the looks of the sprites are quite well done for the sort of population they've got around this town. Doesn't make much sense for the guy who just came from the big city, but I'm just saying it works, especially when you look at someone like Tay or the silver-haired girl whose name I can't remember because I've never been particularly good with names. Man, this game kind of really screwed with me on the character names, because since they're all in Japanese, they're all in like a very specific form of Japanese, which is very hard for me to remember and pin names to faces. But yeah, all of the character art looks really nice. The background art, I'm a little bit torn on, if I'm being honest. Some of it is quite basic. Some of it looks good. When they start getting into, like, the really misty stuff, it looks nice in that sense, but a lot of it is really plain and kind of uninteresting. But then again, like, backwater town, that's just kind of what'll end up happening in that sort of situation. But it still looks a bit plain, but they've at least got some merit behind it. It doesn't look like someone drew it up in 5 minutes and slapped it on in there, so I'll just say this, it looks appropriate. Not the best visual presentation I've ever seen, but it's appropriate. The voice acting is fine. The characters are all defined differently. What's the word I'm looking for? They're all different enough to stand out, and nobody sounds particularly like each other. They can convey their personalities through their voices. They are all enjoyable to listen to. I didn't feel like anyone was phoning it in. They all did a really good job, actually. I'll give them all that. It gets a little bit weird towards the end, but they just kind of apply some, like, weird voice filters over a few people, and it's just like, what? Why do you feel the need to do this? Could you have done this better than putting it through, like, a $5 voice changer you'd pick up at a bloody toy shop or something? But whatever, the regular voices are still fine. The actual, like, sound, the actual music and sound design, though, pretty lightweight, thin on the ground, doesn't have that much going for it. The overall quality of the localization is very good as well. Like, it's lacking a tiny bit of flavor, but everything is well explained. It doesn't feel, like, particularly long in the tooth. They use all the space they need to explain everything. There's a good amount of detail as to what they're doing. There's not that much in the way of like murders detail outside of like some relatively repetitive descriptions. It's a little bit strange how they can use the same words to convey different bodies every now and again, but it does enough. It works for me personally. The writing is fine. I wouldn't call it amazing, but I will say that the localization at least feels, again, appropriate. They did a decent job with it. What else is there to talk about? I already talked about the options, didn't I? I guess I have to get on to the ending, don't I? So, right, so you go through the 3 games of Werewolf, then something comes out of nowhere and just completely blindsides you, and you think to yourself, oh, where did that come from? And then you immediately get a key which lets you go back to unlock some of the other things that you have been missing recently, in terms of like questions that you just could not go through no matter what, which was an interesting way of putting in some like, oh, this is a thing you meant to come back to later sort of foreshadowing. And some people, like, I read a couple of reviews of Raging Loop when I was like researching the game, and a lot of them said that the ending goes off the rails. Now, while I may not completely agree, I can see where they're coming from, because the absolute rate of like reveals, twists, and just otherwise like general craziness about what's going on with the plot is just like, man, it gets stupid. It's like, I say stupid. It all makes sense. They did a lot of foreshadowing, and I managed to pick out a couple of the twists ahead of time, thanks to the fact that they did the foreshadowing pretty well. But I gotta say, the just sheer amount of stuff they left for the final route is ridiculous. The amount of, like, reveals, the amount of things going on, the amount of things that you think are one way but turn out to be another way, but then turn out to be just the first way again, is crazy. Like, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's like they jump back and forth on a lot of really important topics. It's like, how do they manage to pull that off? I don't know, but they even get a bit existential after a while. They go from one reveal to the next, to the next, to the next, and they just go bam, bam, bam. And you find yourself thinking, what the hell am I supposed to think about all this? Especially when you were going through it at the speed that I was. So everything was just coming at you horrendously quick. Like, oh, this character turned out to be this, and this other character turned out to be this, and then this other character turned out to be and all of the things. It's literally just an avalanche of crap. They, like, even the main character calls it, like, the feeling of his brain being crushed by a million sheep, and that's kind of what it feels like. Just having so many things dropped on you immediately. Now, a lot of people have said that the endings don't really make sense, and I disagree, because, as I said before, everything does make sense. They just drop it on you all at a speed which is kind of ridiculous. It makes me think that the ending was actually really rushed in comparison to the rest of the game, especially when they have to go to a lot of, like, really generic backgrounds. There's this one background that you get, which is, like, to put it as simply as possible, the light at the end of the tunnel. So you see that background a lot as they're, like, explaining things or doing things or just anything like that. And there is an absolute ton of, like, areas where you'll just be reading, like, box after box after box after box of text talking about the history of the place, what certain things are in relation to the plot, how the game's mythology works. They drop all of this on you in a period that's like 1/3 of the game. Like, not even 1/3, like, not, to be fair, like, not even 1/4. Like, they just drop it all on you so quickly that I can understand why some people might get overwhelmed. So if you want my advice, when you get key number 20, slow down and just go through it very slowly. Take it as leisurely as you possibly can, because good lord, they just go bam, 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 bam. And it gets ridiculous. I will happily say that some of the reveals are ridiculous. Now, they do talk about how like the supernatural and gods have stuff to do with this, and they basically just kind of have to stop you for like 15 to 30 minutes to basically explain to you all the concepts of like the thing they just dropped on you, which is not the best thing to do. If they had spread out a little bit more foreshadowing among the beginning of the game, it would be a lot better, but still, as I said before, it's just these huge like conversations about the way the world works and all of that crushed into this really tiny space. And they also get very little in the way of like unique art, as I said before. So it really does make me think that they had to rush the ending for some reason. Not going to claim to know why, but it all makes sense if you take it at the proper pace. And is it a good mystery? Is it fun? Yes. Now, having your assumptions about everything turned upside down and then turned upside down again in this game at the very end is kind of hilarious, actually, in comparison. Like, you start thinking that everything is a certain way, and then just having it all turned on its head, and then having it all turned on its head again is great, because it does make sense. It's just, I can imagine some people getting kind of annoyed, thinking, oh, it's like this, oh no, it's like this, oh no, it was actually like this. It would get frustrating after a bit, especially if you're doing it all in one go, trying to figure it all out. And just trying to get through to the end, which like I was doing, because I ended up getting to sleep at like 2 AM last night trying to get through the bloody just massive info dump of like text boxes and stuff they've got going on. It's fine, it's just really crazy, and I'm just warning you now. Just relax, take it slow, and be very, very like open to the ideas that they give you, because man, some of it they do not foreshadow, so they have to drop it in on you right then and there. I can kind of understand why they didn't, mainly because the whole ideas of them would basically just like reveal the entire context of the plot. But yeah, it's just a thing. I know that I've just spent like the last 10 minutes saying it drops a lot of stuff on you really quickly, including full explanations for why things are the way they are in this world. And it works if you take it slow, but I can understand why some people would feel overwhelmed. But it's still a fun mystery. The twists make sense. The overall what the fuck levels of what's going on is great. Especially when they just like throw curveballs at you and then curve the curveballs back into fastballs somehow. It's great. It's actually really enjoyable. I enjoyed finding out what the mystery was. I didn't enjoy it enough to play through the entire game again and looking at the, the brain work with me here. The revelation mode, where you go through and you get to see the deeper thoughts of all the characters throughout the other games, especially since that I don't think it would help much with the overall, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't think it would help much with the overall, understanding of the plot, because I did get it. I did understand everything. It does make sense at the end. I can't tell you about it without getting into spoilers. But man, yeah, just take it slow. That's my best advice when you get to the end. Just take it slow and maybe play the Revelation mode. I don't know. They do try and tease you with it. They do say something along the lines of there's a bit more comedic humor, which this game does have, but it's in very short bursts, which I appreciate, because you've got, stories I don't know why I'm bringing up The Last Jedi, but it's the first example that springs to mind, where they made a Yo Mama joke right on the cusp of a gigantic battle, and it felt really, really out of place. This game comes close to that with some of its comedic moments, but it's mainly just, little sprinkles of it in the middle of like 10 situations to give it that little bit of an up curve. And it works a lot better. It gives you just that little bit of breathing room that you need in order to make the dramatic stuff not feel like just a constant overbearing dread. Because it would be very easy to get tired of it. And they do have some good writing on the characters to help you feel, you know, bad for them when they do die. So, you know, what else do I have to say? It's just, I mean, I guess it's time for just a general summary, but look, I really enjoyed Raging Loop. I'm really surprised by that, because you would think with Kemco's name all over it, like, they did, like, it's like a separate team inside Kemco that developed it. It's not EXE Create, the people who are just constantly pushing out those really generic RPGs that all feel identical to each other. It's a different studio with a different bunch of people behind it. But Kemco have got their name all over this damn thing, so I'm going into it thinking this might not be as good as I was hoping, but it actually wildly exceeded my expectations. The mystery is really enjoyable. They explain everything. The characters, while not deep, are at least, like, reasonable. You can predict what they're going to do. You end up liking them because they end up being relatively enjoyable characters. None of them are particularly annoying. None of them, like, act out of character very often. They are all compelling while also not being so deep as to ruin the pacing of the plot. The overall usage of the game of werewolf in the 3 times that you go through it are all, like, really enjoyable. They did a good job in both pacing it so that it's still a dramatic story without getting into a lull like some games of werewolves do, while also turning the game on its head by putting you up against characters and not like real people. They're like characters who are in a real situation where they might die, so they might act irrationally. And they do a really good job in making that work. They have a ton of mysteries, a ton of little bits of information that they drop along the way that make it feel, like, reasonable. They do give you, like, even though it's linear, it's still an enjoyable story about hunting for information. The ending might be a little bit too, like, roller coaster ridey for most people, but they explain everything. It all makes sense at the end of the day, even if they have to take 30 minutes to explain to you, like, to have, like, an existential crisis with you. It still makes sense at the end, as long as you take it at a reasonable pace. And, yeah, the presentation is good. The PC port is fine. I imagine that the Switch and PS4 ports are fine too. It's almost a shame that this didn't come out on Vita, because it showed up on Vita before it did, like, everything that wasn't the PC, because it's, like, Unity and really simple, but still. At the end of the day, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I really enjoyed the mystery. Everything makes sense. The characters are fine, and the presentation is good. Would I recommend it? I would. I actually would. I'd give it like a solid 8 out of 10 for being a engaging visual novel with some interesting mysteries behind it. Some good presentation, some good writing, and just an interesting concept. I hope that 40-minute rant gave you something to work with, because I just spent 16 hours in this game. I hope I can talk about it for 40 minutes and make some sense. Thankfully, I didn't spoil anywhere near as much as I thought I needed to, but yeah, I like it. I would recommend it. It reminds me a lot of games like Zero Escape, with lots of mysteries that you slowly unlock. In fact, it reminds me a lot of Zero Escape than more other visual novels. Like, it's got a game that you play. They take advantage of this game, like, a lot. They play with the rules. They make everything work in a way that would make sense in this fictional context. And they have, like, lots of death, lots of looping, and just, it's great. They did a good job with it. I would recommend it. I'm gonna shut up now because I'm gonna keep repeating myself if I go on any longer. And Jesus, we're 5 minutes away from running out of stock footage, so I'm just gonna let the rest of this footage play and let you listen to some more of that voice acting because, as I said, it's actually pretty good. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.
そいじゃやっぱり読み人じゃないんかね。
やめえ、タイバー。おい、どっから来た？
あ、はい、東京です。
いくつじゃ？
年は24です。
地位より上じゃが。
申し遅れました。房石春明です。芹沢さんにも紹介された通り、バイクで事故って迷い込みました。どうやら僕は、ここでは異分子のようで、変なことを言ったりしたりして、皆さんに迷惑かけたくないなと、それで、芹沢さんに紹介をお願いしたんですが、僕から改めてお願いします。すぐ出て行きますから、それまでは僕の存在を多めに見ていただけないかと、それと、僕を助けてくれた芹沢さんを責めないであげてください。
春明さん。
おそらく芹沢さんは、ここの常識を外れたところで僕を助けてくれたんだと思うんです。学生たちもみんな驚いてた。
まあ。
これでも大人です。自分の責任は自分で取りますし、皆さんにかけた迷惑は可能な限り償います。ですので、どうかお願いします。
ちゃんとしとる、タイバー。
あたしゃすかんわね。そんなに髪茶色に染めてから。
よそは皆こうよ。はよう返せばええ。
ほいじゃ好きにしなさいね。
春明。春か。うちの孫も春じゃ。紛らわしい。
あ、もしかして
そう、春ちゃんのおじいさんの牧島勘三さんよ。
どうも。
皿長に突っ込んだか。
いえ、コンビニで道を聞いた後、脇道に入って未舗装になったところで滑り落ちて横転しました。
で、皿長登ったか。なぜ途中で引き返さねえ？わしと匠で見てきちゃる。
匠は他を見よるわよ。
タイバー、追い出す思うて手伝わせ。
カンちゃんはいっつもそうね。
ばあちゃん、おやさん、どうした？ちえみ、こいつは？
あ、匠姉ちゃん。
ああ、そいつは災難だったな。ああ、おやさん。
わしとお前で拾う。
だな。ばあちゃん、こいつ助けっからちょっと待っててな。もう農薬は巻き終わってるから、昼から草刈るわ。
匠は優しいね。
こんなもんなんでもないって。すぐ何もなかったようにできるからよ。
そうね。お兄ちゃんや。
僕ですか？はい。
ここは安水言うてね。あんまりええ場所じゃないんよ。あたしらもよそのもんが苦手だし、よそのもんも触れんがええ。じゃからはよ出てお行き。
はい、そのつもりです。
話はついた感じか？
うん、ありがとう、匠兄ちゃん。